Hey everyone, Dan Abbott from the Shark Video channel here, and I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about how to film breaching sharks. So, first things first, here's the breach. Pretty spectacular. There's probably nothing in nature that is quite as spectacular as a great white shark breaching out of the water. But you can watch the full video, and I'll put the links in the description below, that builds up a little bit more of a story as to how the breach comes about. And I'm going to explain about how to then create that video that tells that story. A breaching video just by itself is cool. It looks pretty amazing, and I'm sure people would enjoy watching it and would probably share it. But there's much more to what is going on in that short video than just the breach. I'm going to talk a little bit about the editing techniques, a little bit about the music, a little bit about how to film the shark actually breaching. But first of all, a little bit of backstory. So the boat we were on belongs to a great white shark cage diving operator called White Shark Africa, and they run internship programs every month. Some of them had never seen a breach before. So there was a lot of excitement, a lot of anticipation on the boat before we went out. And that's why I put in those shots at the very beginning of the boat being launched, of people kind of looking around, waiting to see what was going to happen. A girl kind of filming on her camera, the water behind the boat. All this stuff is building the anticipation. Now, we were out there that morning for an hour and a half. And here's the thing, there was only one breach that morning. Yeah, one breach, and that was it. That was the one that was filmed. Now, the other thing about that breach is it happened very, very early on. In fact, it was about 10 seconds after we started towing the decoy, which I'll explain what is in just a moment. Now, that meant that no one else filmed it. In fact, hardly anyone else really saw it. It was over so quickly, and then there was nothing else for the rest of the morning. So those shots at the beginning of the video are really important to start building that sense of anticipation and that sense of expectancy as to what might be about to happen. White Shark Africa go out and do cage diving trips every day, but it's the towing and the decoy trips that are the most exciting. Now, to do those trips, you have to get up quite early. Great white sharks are ambush predators, and their most successful time of hunting is before the sun rises. If you look down into the water before the sun's come up and it's still quite dark, you can't really see anything down there at all, and that is why the sharks hunt at that time. Great white sharks are very camouflaged, dark on top, light below, and that means that if you're looking down into the water when there's low light, you can't see anything at all. Cape fur seals are quite well known for coming back to Seal Island on the surface. And that's why you see breaching in places like South Africa, where there aren't quite so many breaches in places like California, where their prey, things like elephant seals, will spend more time down on the bottom. But Cape fur seals tend to stay along the top. So from a filmmaking side of things, you need to know, one, what time of day they're going to be doing that, and two, what are the best locations for doing it in. In Mossel Bay, where we filmed that video, there is a place called Seal Island, which is about a 10-minute boat ride from the port. Seal Island is home to about 3,000 to 4,000 Cape fur seals, and that is why the sharks are hunting in that area. Now, I mentioned towing a decoy, and that's basically a cutout of a seal shape, and that is usually made up of a wetsuit. We would then tow that behind the boat, usually about 10 to 15 meters behind the boat, and that would be what we're looking at to wait to see the sharks breach. Now, you'd be thinking they'd be breaching on this thing all the time, but they're actually not that interested in it. Like I said, only one breach that morning. There was another moment where a shark was interested in the decoy and came up to inspect it, and that clip I actually put into the video, where you see a huge shark's fin just moving slowly past the decoy, and that shows that they're actually thinking about this a little bit more than people perhaps realize they do. They're actually inspecting this object and not just lunging in full tilt just to take this thing out. Now, when it came to the actual filming of this particular breach, I happened to be in the right place at the right time, but more importantly, my camera was rolling. Now, like I said, this happened about 10 seconds into us towing. I'd only just hit record. I'd made sure that some of the settings were right, like the aperture and the f-stop, making sure everything was set the way I wanted it. I wanted to film this in slow motion. Everything looks better in slow motion, so I set my camera up to film at 180 frames per second. Now, if you're not sure, frames per second just means how many frames are in a single second of shot. So most things are filmed in either 24 or 30 frames per second. Most Hollywood cinema is filmed at 24 frames per second. But if you add more frames in per second, then you're going to be able to get smoother motion if you start slowing things down. If you just to slow down a video at 24 frames, by the time you've halved the speed of the video, then it starts to look a little bit jumpy. But if you're shooting something at 60 frames and half that to 30 frames, then it's going to still look quite smooth at half the speed. Now at 180 frames, I can slow that right down to really, really nice and slow, and it still looks really crisp and really smooth. Some cameras will even shoot up to 1,000, even 2,000 frames per second, where you can get insanely slow motion captures. I don't quite need that, so 180 frames seems to work well for me. So I was filming, rolling, making sure that whatever was going to happen, even if it happened in the very, very beginning, which it turns out that it did, I was still going to capture it. Now the thing with great white sharks is you never know what's going to happen at any time. They may even breach out the water when there's no bait, no decoy, no seal, without warning at all. In fact, that happened while I was filming on the boat. I just happened to be filming a little bit lower down. If I was zoomed out, I would have captured an incredible moment, but instead, I got this. Now that just goes to show that anything can happen at any given time. So the most important thing is to make sure that you are filming. You can always go back and delete those videos that aren't any good and don't show anything, but if you're not filming, you're not going to capture it. Okay, you've got the breach. Amazing. It looks superb. What are you then going to do with that video? You're just going to post it as it is, or actually put it together in a short sequence? Now, for me, it's more interesting to see the story behind something happening. And that usually involves people. Now, people were involved in this particular video. You see a few of the interns kind of looking out at the decoy, filming on their cameras. This is a human story. We're out there watching and observing the sharks breaching. This isn't just about a shark. Now, the way I wanted to shoot this video is to create suspense. There is a lot of anticipation and suspense on the boat when you're waiting for a shark to breach, because you know it's going to be spectacular, you just don't know when it's going to happen. And so I wanted to make sure those cuts were nice and quick. In fact, on every beat of the music, which I'll talk about in just a moment. And that means that when you're seeing an image, your brain has about a second to process what's going on before it jumps on to the next one. And that is building anticipation. It's almost like a pulse, which brings me on to the music. I wanted something that wasn't going to bring too much attention to itself. It's going to be quite low down, but you've got that pulse almost dictating how the images are changing. I did think about putting something a little bit more upbeat, like maybe like an electronic kind of feel over the top, but it didn't feel quite right. It doesn't add that same atmosphere, that same kind of suspense. Now, when that breach actually hits, that suspense is gone. The moment is happening, the suspense is all done with, and we're into the big, big moment. And I wanted to get a big explosive kind of sound. Now, I remembered from a documentary that I watched about 10 years ago of a shark breaching, this incredible sound that just made it sound like something was smashing through some glass. So I went back and I found that sound, chopped it up and put it back into my video. I've also added a very low kind of droning noise underneath, which you hear at the end, especially when the credits are rolling. And that is kind of like a moment of rest. The big moment's happened and now it's kind of all settling down again, because actually in reality, that breach happens in 1 second and then it's back to calm. You'll get some splash and then it's disappeared and it's gone, and that's kind of the feeling that I wanted to create. Now, also on the boat that day was Ollie from Shark Video Channel, and he had his drone, his Mavic, flying around the boat. And I wanted to put just one shot of that drone footage in there, because that then gives a sense of scale. You haven't really seen where the boat is. So I put that clip in there. Again, just 1 second, which allows your brain to process what you're seeing and then moving on to the next shot. So make sure you're filming and recording, make sure you're in the right place, make sure you're there at the right time, but also make sure you've got enough shots around it to put together a little bit of a story. It's going to be much more interesting to watch if there are people involved and you're seeing the development of how they're finding this situation. Thanks for watching, hope this has helped. Please leave a comment and let us know what you think of the video, and if you've got any tips of your own about how to film breaching sharks, and we'll see you guys next time.